Welcome to How to Be the Difference with your hosts, Joanna and Paul. A podcast for the career you want, or maybe just that push you need. If you want to know what your dream career looks like, join us to get inspiration from industry experts that will make that dream career a reality.
Hello, welcome to How to Be the Difference. My name is Joanna Molina and I'm joined with Paul Linsky. Hola, Paul, ¿cómo estás?
Mi bien, gracias. I knew that one, Joanna. Thanks.
Oh, that's really good. Paul, this week's topic is data science. We spoke with Erik Stettler, which is coming up a little later. But before, I love to know, what do you know about data science?
I suppose, Joanna, when I hear data science, I think sports. Like, I'm crazy about football, soccer. But have you ever heard of the movie Moneyball?
No.
Well, Brad Pitt is in Moneyball. He plays a general manager of the Oakland A's, which is a major league baseball team. And the character is Billy Beane. And he completely shook up baseball solely by looking at data for player recruitment. And by taking everybody who just didn't visually look the part and just solely focused on the data, he was able to put together an amazing team that completely changed everyone's perception. For instance, Liverpool. Have you heard of Liverpool Football Club?
Yes, and actually I did see that film. Now I remember.
Oh, okay, excellent. Liverpool Football Club, they are one of the biggest clubs in world football. They hadn't won the top flight of the English football, the Premier League, for 30 years, and they changed it all last year. And one of the main reasons, there's lots of reasons and lots of factors in this, but one of the main reasons that they were able to achieve this was a man called Ian Graham. He was in charge of data at the club. He doesn't even watch football matches. He just sits there, puts all the numbers through the system, and they're able to base all of their player recruitment, all the XG, which is expected goals, and all sorts of different outputs and inputs, and they come out with this amazing, efficient product, which is a football team. So I suppose that's what I think of when I think of data science or data analytics, and how broad and general the whole umbrella is, because you can have a career in anything you want, because it's been applied to absolutely everything.
Absolutely, and thank you for linking it to your passion. We can definitely tell how passionate you are about football. In my case, I personally love also how data science, as you said, is everywhere and is helping us tackle the biggest problems of the world. Things like global warming or our health, the current pandemic, education, gender equality, or just quality in general, sustainability. Every single decision influenced by it. I personally love that. But in my day-to-day life, what it comes to mind is my smartwatch. And so I'm constantly checking it, and it really helps me be aware of the habits that I have and try to change them or improve them. Do you have a smartwatch, Paul?
Absolutely not. I can't. I can't be reminded. Like I refuse to wear something that it's just going to tell me bad news. But go on.
But no, everything is bad. To me, it gives me statistics. So it tells me how much I'm sleeping, how much I walk, my heart rate, the calories I'm burning, and how I'm doing with my weight and exercise goals. That is a little bit disappointing sometimes. So yes, that probably agrees with you.
Yeah, tell me about it. By the way, I bought a weighing scales the other day, and that was a bad move. But go on, sorry.
Yeah. So now moving on to our guest. We have now our guest coming up. He's going to be telling us everything about data science, the good, the bad, how to be successful in the career. Paul, why don't you introduce us to our guest today?
Yes, we're very excited. Erik Stettler is a data scientist, Harvard graduate, venture capitalist, and chief economist of TopTal, advancing research and thought leadership on the global talent economy while helping companies scale their teams worldwide. Erik divides his time between the United States and Latin America, and through his work helps to realize a world where everyone can realize their full potential, regardless of location or the other barriers that today still impedes them.
So hello, everyone. We are here in How to Be the Difference. And today we have a very, very special guest. Erik, I'm so happy to have you here today with us. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor.
No, we are going to have a lot of fun. So Erik, I would like to know whereabouts in the world are you and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So under non-pandemic circumstances, I split my time across the Americas with a focus on New York, Boston, and Colombia. And I have mostly, pretty much entirely been here in Colombia the last 12 months due to the more space basically that it has allowed me versus New York and Boston. So the short answer is I'm basically in my place in South America, but under more normal circumstances, I consider myself a citizen of the world and enjoy traveling and living in new places quite a bit.
And so today we'd like to talk about your career in data science, and we'd like to pick your brain about everything from the beginning. So how is it that you choose your career in data science?
It was the result of a process, which I'm sure all careers tend to be. I had some amazing teachers in economics when I was younger, when I was in high school and then undergrad studies. And what drew me to economics was the collision of the quantitative elements and the extremely human elements. So an economy is a living, breathing thing. It's not a lot of numbers on a screen. And you have to understand what we call behavioral economics as well, if you really want to truly have any sense of what the global markets and economies are doing. And keeping in mind, of course, that they're composed ultimately of people. So first it was economics. And then throughout my first career in New York, I joined a consulting firm that was technically called an economic consulting firm. So the match was obvious in that sense, but they had an extremely heavy emphasis on data science. And their role was to basically help the global financial community whenever there were extreme crises or other situations that required special attention in the global markets, such as the subprime crisis, which many of your users, your listeners rather, may be too young to remember, but that was before the pandemic, the most recent large economic shock. And through that, I started to get much more immersed in what we call data science. And my boss had a Harvard PhD, so I was extremely fortunate to learn directly from her for years. And it built over time as a result of that. But I would be lying if I said I had some brilliant plan from the beginning. It was a process of exploration, which I think is critical for the opening moments of any career.
And what does a career in data science look like? Do you think it's for everyone, or do you need to have something special, specific to pursue it?
Well, there's so many things I would want to say about what does a career in data science entail. I would say fundamentally, the most valuable commodity in the world is information. And your job as a data scientist is to convert data to information. And keeping in mind that data is not the same as information. I think that we make that mistake a lot. You hear people say data is the new whatever, the new oil. And that's actually a very interesting example that people use, or metaphor that people use, because oil by itself is often useless. You have to refine it. You have to do things to it to actually be able to use it in any real capacity. Likewise, there's a tremendous amount of data that is currently going unused. And that includes data that might hold, for example, I saw an interesting video by The Economist recently saying that only 5% of the medical data in the world is being actively used for analysis. So this data could hold secrets on how to cure some of the worst diseases in the world and things like that. So your job as a data scientist, above all, is you receive the raw data, but then you turn that into actionable insights that companies or other organizations can use in order to make decisions. In terms of your personality or your profile, I think you asked about, I would say no, there is no single profile for it. I think that the media, as with many things involving data science and artificial intelligence, has presented a very specific and often misleading image of it. I would say you do not need to be a numbers person. I don't sit around doing equations all day. I have my computer to do the math part for me. My job is to think creatively in terms of what types of variables would be affecting something and how. And it involves a tremendous amount of creative problem solving. So I would say above all, you need to be someone who loves creative problem solving, who loves solving mysteries. I always joke that each new data set is like a murder mystery novel. You know that there's something in there. And the question is, yeah, seriously.
I like that.
Yeah. And there's something there. Like beneath the surface of all that data, there's some solution you can find to a serious problem. And that's what makes it so cool. So I would say to anyone that is interested overall, do not accept any kind of external messages, whether it's from the media, whether it's from people you know, that you are not cut out for it, so to speak. The math follows. That, frankly, is not the hard part. The hard part is the creativity and the mindset.
That's fantastic. How do you break into data science?
So how would one break into data science? I would say, above all, you should start learning some of the tools that get used in terms of, for example, some of the coding languages. So, for example, Python, like the snake, and R, the letter, are two of the most widely used languages for any large data set. Sometimes you can frankly just use Excel, but for any large data set, you tend to want something a bit more powerful. And R is more, just to give a quick comparison between the two, R is more, I would say, cutting edge in terms of it's more open source. It tends to be really on the bleeding edge of whatever tools are being used in data science. But as a result of that, it can also be a little less elegant and user-friendly to implement, whereas Python is extremely powerful. It's like driving a very powerful car in automatic transmission. You just need to focus on driving, and the car and the engine do the work for you. So I would, for one thing, recommend that people start learning those languages. And again, do not be intimidated by them. It's always a bit of a challenge at the beginning when you learn any new skill, but you would be surprised how quickly you can begin doing functional programming with both. There are many free, wonderful resources online. For example, Code Academy, which has free classes in both, and then many other resources that may not be completely free, but very reasonably priced. So I would say make the commitment to learning, to spending a few minutes a day, even if it's literally a few minutes every day, to studying those tools, and think of it as going to the gym, but for your mind, and you will reap the benefits for the rest of your life. In terms of the data side, so now speaking just in terms of how do you think about using data, I would say there are many wonderful books to start reading. The Signal and the Noise is a great one, and that discusses very real world examples of how to implement data science and the pitfalls, which we should also talk about, because as with any powerful tool, it can be very dangerous when used improperly. So there are books like that. And then I would say similar there to the part about learning the proper tools in terms of coding languages, many online resources that discuss the foundational assumptions and approaches of the key models that you would use. So things like Khan Academy, things on, YouTube has such a wealth of instructional videos. Really make use of the fact that the internet has opened up this realm of knowledge to you, and approach it as something fun, something engaging. Watch the videos and simply tell yourself each day, I'm going to learn a new tool and technique, and then start actually doing a project once you feel ready, because actually doing something is, of course, the best way to learn. That's what I'm so grateful for with my prior career that I mentioned in New York. I was not doing theoretical data science. My job was, if there's a crisis in the global markets, figure out what is really happening in terms of the deeper analytics of what the markets are doing. So that forced creative thinking, and it forced learning as I went, because there was no other option, basically. So the project could literally be, if you love gardening, for example, I love plants, build a database of the plants you have and what you've been doing with them and how they're doing and everything, and start analyzing for just anything, like something that's fun and engaging for you. If you love finance and you have stocks, then start downloading some of the price information from Yahoo Finance or Google, and start analyzing the stock returns more. Something that will engage you, that allows you to start implementing the tools as you go.
I remember when you first started collecting data from your plants. I hope they are doing well.
They're doing great. Thank you. They send you their regards.
Thanks. I want to dive deeper into something you just mentioned. How can you use data inappropriately, or what is actually that part of data science that you probably hate? You just spoke about what you love and what's the fun part, but what is that dark side of data science?
Yeah, so this is a very important topic, which gets not nearly enough attention in the media. And this is the real danger of artificial intelligence and related fields, rather than what we tend to think when we think of those terms. The other side of the coin of the fact that we have so much data available to us and such powerful tools to use it is you can prove anything. So if you told me, prove that, and I'm not going to say it out loud, but like, let's assume something that all of us would find very offensive or contrary to our values, and you told me, prove this. You could go out and find the data and prove it, because there's just so much available to you and so many tools to use. So you can find a way to arrive at any assumption. Now, the example I just used sounded a bit more nefarious, but what really happens, the real danger is you accidentally think you've proven something without having properly thought it through, because the ability is there, the tools and the data are there to arrive at so many different conclusions. And as a result, I think, for example, whenever I talk to a young data scientist, like someone who just graduated university and they're just starting their first job, if I ask them, for example, like, how would you test this thing? Like, for example, the implications of climate change on this kind of agricultural ecosystem or something. How would you approach that? I tend to get a list of very powerful algorithms that they would use and other very powerful tools they would use. But the danger of that is they need to know under what circumstances do you really use this tool? When do you use a chainsaw? I mean, don't use it if you don't have to, and be very careful, like be very aware of how to properly use it if you do use it. The same goes with the powerful algorithms we use. You've seen, for example, in the news, some real disturbing stories about how biases in hiring or other things have been accidentally encoded into AI because companies take all the data, they run it through the algorithms, and then they start predicting who the right candidates are. But if the hiring process itself was imperfect and maybe subject to unconscious bias, in which, for example, minorities may have had less of an opportunity to work there, you accidentally end up encoding that, literally, in the code that decides who gets the interview and who doesn't. So I would say, I think data scientists should almost have to take the same kind of Hippocratic oath that doctors do of do no harm. Like, you really need to think, like, very serious decisions will get made based on your analyses. So one, never use a tool if you can't, never use a particular algorithm or other type of tool if you can't answer the question of under what circumstances do you use this and not use it, and what are the key assumptions underlying it, and are you confident that those hold in this situation? And also realizing that we are so awash in data that you have to be very conscientious of what data you're using, why, is it the proper sample to use, or you will end up finding what we call spurious correlation, meaning not real, but just if you look on paper, it looks like a correlation that leads you down some extremely wrong and sometimes extremely dangerous angles. But to end on a slightly more positive note, I would say this is part of what makes it so interesting as a career is you are searching for truth in many ways amidst the numbers, and you have this responsibility to yourself and to your employer and frankly to the world to harness it in a very responsible and thoughtful way so that we don't end up doing things that are based on wrong assumptions or encoding things that should not be encoded into the way the world works.
Then following up, if you can change one thing about the industry, what will that be?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say, I think that focusing more, this is going to sound so boring, but I would say focusing much more on tools that select the right data and that properly prepare the data for analysis, rather than the very powerful tools that then use the data to arrive at conclusions. I would say, and this is another thing to be mindful of for those who want to do this, a lot of the battle is getting the data ready, because data does not arrive to you on a silver platter. That when the data was generated, people weren't thinking of the data scientists who wanted to use it someday. It just gets generated. And often, especially, for example, with large companies, the data can be in multiple different departments, not very well organized, not very compatible. Same variables have different names depending on the department, or they're measured differently based on the department. So just getting the data to the point where you're confident with the raw material that you're using, I would say I would love for the industry to focus a bit more on that and less on the extremely powerful and more kind of sexy, AI algorithms and everything that you then get to use the data for. But you only do that once you're very certain of what you're putting into the model. There's a phrase, garbage in, garbage out, which means what it sounds like. If you don't really, you can have the best model in the world, but if you're not careful about the data you put in first, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. How do you thrive in data science?
Well, I think above all have an intellectual curiosity because this is always changing. So the moment you sit still, you're drifting backwards. I think if there's one field, I would say cybersecurity might be the other, but if there's one field where everything that was current and true today is going to be shifting tomorrow, it's data science. Because if you think about it, we're always generating new data, we're always generating new algorithms that examine the data. And these algorithms, once you start getting more into the area of artificial intelligence, these algorithms themselves are learning and adopting based on the new data coming in. So the same way, for example, when you Google something and the algorithm learns a bit more about you and about all of us, or when you buy something on Amazon and it learns a bit more about you. And so I would say you need to understand you are never done learning. And the moment you feel that you are is the moment that you will start declining in terms of your effectiveness and your career will start declining. So I would say above all, you need to love learning. You need to love challenges. You need to read books. You need to be reading some of the journals that come out. There are many, wonderful journals in terms of more technical elements of the new tools that are being developed, and be humble in the sense that know that you are probably wrong with many of your assumptions whenever you approach a new situation. And remember that the core of the scientific method, which is called data scientist, so you are a scientist, the foundational element of the scientific method is don't assume you know the truth. Basically, come at it thinking I'm probably wrong, but I'm going to test and I'm going to kind of whittle away at my ignorance. And through that, I will discover truth, or at least be less wrong about certain things. There was a wonderful, I can't remember who it was, but there was some philosopher who said one of the most important moments in human history was the discovery of ignorance, meaning for a lot of human history, we thought we knew everything. We thought we had the world figured out. And then around the Enlightenment or thereabouts, we said, you know what, we're actually extremely ignorant about all of this and we should start testing it. And that was a profound mind shift, basically. So always be humble, especially given the power of the tools at your disposal and the significance of the decisions that may get made based on your results as well.
I love that. That is all the growth mindset. What are those myths surrounding data science?
Well, I would say that I think that a lot of people think of data scientists as someone right out of the Big Bang Theory or something. So a very specific personality. And I won't ask you to comment on the extent to which I fit that profile or not, but I would say basically that the classic more nerdy type, I think, is what people think, and the image that's given out there for data scientists, just because it's easy for other people to then quickly make assumptions about and to feel more comfortable with. I would say that does not fit at all in my experience with the people I know who I respect the most. These are some of the most adventurous, fascinating people in the world. And that's precisely what drew them to data science, is they love solving problems. They love tackling big challenges and everything. And again, the math, that we're not sitting around writing equations all day. We have the tools at our disposal. We of course should know what the underlying math fundamentally is doing, because you want to know obviously the kind of tool you're using. But that's not what we do, and it's not even necessarily the mindset that or the focus area intellectually that you need to do it. You just need to be a very creative and intellectually curious person. I would also say, your question was about data scientists. I would say there's also a huge misunderstanding about when we talk about, for example, artificial intelligence and related fields. I think there's a tremendous misunderstanding in the world about what that truly is and what the true risks and opportunities truly are, which is a whole other topic. And I don't know how much you want to get into that, as it's less directly about careers, but it's certainly something that is a very important topic in and of itself.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about skills, because I've seen you grown in various careers, not only of data science, but in every single role that you've had. You've been successful. What will you say are those skills to succeed in the 21st century?
So university is learning how to learn, and then you just need to apply that for the rest of your life. I would say you need to, for one thing, also not go alone. So I think one thing I forgot to mention was you can, through many different resources, join groups of like-minded people who are also learning this and also doing it. So there are resources, for example, such as meetup.com, which is used by groups with any shared special interests to organize, not just online, but under at least normal circumstances, to have in-person meetups where they give presentations about what they're doing and debate things and have networking and everything. So I would say the story of my trajectory has been the people that I've met and learned from and worked with. And then I think that always just approaching it with the sense of, okay, this is an opportunity to learn if you're facing something that is daunting. And then also, again, taking advantage of the fact that because of the internet, if you really do have this unbelievable wealth of knowledge available to you, it's more information than knowledge. The internet will not give you the knowledge, but the information is there that you can convert to knowledge if you take it in the right way and approach it with an open mind and do your own projects and things like that. I would say also, I mean, I would say to the people starting out in their careers, I mean, there's so many big battles to fight in the world. And another thing, so for example, climate change, or we just witnessed this fascinating global race to develop a vaccine for COVID, which was done in an unbelievably quick amount of time, by the way. So that was, I think, a tremendous human achievement there that we witnessed. I would say another thing was that I picked some battles to fight that I really cared about. So it wasn't just a job. It wasn't like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to learn intellectually about data, or I'm going to make a good amount of money. That those things follow if you pick a real battle to fight that you truly care about. That motivates you through the more difficult parts of it. So I would say you have to be sure you do that as well, because it's not easy as a career, intellectually or otherwise. And you need to make sure you're doing it for the right reason, or you will end up eventually saying, you know what, I could make decent money just doing something that's a lot easier in many ways, but also less rewarding, frankly.
Yes, if you have clear your why, your purpose.
Exactly. Start with your why.
Yeah. Absolutely. What are those habits that you recommend in order to succeed in any career?
So I just read this amazing book called Atomic Habits, which I have to mention.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah. And that was one of those books where the author might as well have said in the opening page, you probably think you know what this book is going to tell you. Like, you probably think you know what I'm about to say. Like, yeah, habits are important. No, like that book was just, that was such an eye-opener. So given that you asked that question and that I just read that book, I have to mention it. I have no relationship with the author or anything like that. So it's just a book that I loved. So I would say, speaking in terms of habits, that, you know, it's easy to set large goals. It's a lot more difficult to set them into daily habits. And that's the difference between actually getting to them or not. You need to basically pick, I would say, up to 5 or 6 things that you will do every day, unless something extremely serious prevents you from doing so. And the book actually made the wonderful point that it's actually the days that are the most difficult that are the most important, because that's the day that you're really proving to yourself, I'm going to work out today, even though I don't feel well and it's raining and cold outside, like I'm still going to go for a run. That's the day when you're really programming yourself that you are somebody who exercises every day. So I have 6 habits that I do every day that I hold myself to. And I would say that, you know, one of them is reading. Doesn't matter what it is, but reading has to be one of them. Another one is doing something involving statistical problem solving, which is not necessarily work. It could just be learning about a new theory, a new model online, or something, watching a YouTube video about it. So I would say the key habits are constant self-improvement and learning, and making it something that is fundamental to your identity, and also always being willing to always be taking advantage of the network available to you in your life, which is much bigger than you think. People underestimate the size of their second degree network, meaning they think of who they know, but they don't think of who the people they know, for example. So, like, I'll give you one just very random example. I have a very close second degree connection with a former US president. And it's a close enough connection that if I ever found myself in the same room as the former president, I could just say, hey, I'm friends with this person, and we would instantly have something to talk about. I don't mean that as a name drop at all. I'm just saying it's actually a very random connection. But that's just an example of when you think, who do the people you know, you can be amazed by how large your network truly becomes. And that's extremely important to keep in mind, because data science is not something that is always easy to break into as a field. So, you know, thinking in terms of your network is very important. But regarding habits, I would say my habits are simple, but simple is not the same as easy. You know, exercise every day, read every day. I love foreign languages, so I study a foreign language every day. Like things that are that are not that different. Meditate, for example. I was a skeptic on that for a long time, but just sit down for, even if it's 10 minutes in the morning, and just put your headphones on with a good, very calming music, or other, there are lots of YouTube videos that have kind of soundscape available. And as silly as it sounds, it like, you feel very different after those 10 minutes in terms of your focus and your mental energy. So very simple. And I think simplicity lies on the other side of complexity, meaning when you master something, it actually feels simplistic. I think Einstein said something along those lines. And if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, or not a 6-year-old, but a 6th grader or something, then you don't really understand it. So I would say seek simplicity, but in the things that really matter for you, in your habits. And the final thing I'll say, which I think also came from the book, but was, I think, really important, was don't think of your daily habits as just like, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to read, I'm going to meditate, and it's like a list of things to do. Think of the rhythm of your day and how they fit in, and how each can lead into the next, and how they can build upon each other over the course of that day. That makes them into a much more reinforcing system than just saying, yeah, I've got 5 things I need to do before I head to bed tonight, or else I will feel upset with myself.
That's very valuable. What is the best piece of advice that you've been given?
Wow. Okay, give me a minute. I've been given a lot of great advice, so that's why I'm thinking about it. I think know what you don't know was one of the big ones. When I was starting out in New York, I was doing very well and advancing pretty quickly. And I remember one day my boss sat me down and said, you're doing very well and you're going to go very far. But as someone who's been doing this for 40 more years than you have, let me make sure you understand that you're just starting out. So know what you don't know, and never take that as a bad thing. Like, it's nothing shameful. Quite the contrary. It takes a lot of strength and courage to admit what you don't know. And this goes back to what I said earlier about how ignorance is one of the most important discoveries. The concept of it, that we don't know a lot, was one of the most important moments in human history. So I would say know what you don't know. And what that means to me is there's a lot that I do know and that I can use on a daily basis, but knowing that there are so many things out there that I'm completely ignorant of or probably wrong about keeps me in check against maybe some of my worst impulses in terms of wanting to more rapidly draw conclusions based on things or assumptions or things like that. So I think there's a lot of, I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but I think there's a lot to that statement there of always remind yourself how much there is that you have yet to discover.
Yes, it is definitely very deep. So I'd like to know a little bit more about, like, who do you admire, Erik, and why?
I admire entrepreneurs above all. And I know there are some famous names that I could easily rattle off, but I would say I prefer to actually say I admire the ones who are not yet famous and not yet rich, who are working just day and night to solve real problems that they've encountered in their life. And I've known many of them. I've invested into 50 companies and been advisors with many more. So I've met entrepreneurs from all across the world and of many different personalities, many different backgrounds. And entrepreneurs is another example of a role that is far too pigeonholed in the mind of the world. Like, they think that you have to be this very specific type of person or personality, and it's absolutely not true. So I would say above all, the people that I've learned the most from and that have challenged me the most have been the entrepreneurs that I've known, and just the approach to life and business that they take, and the problem-solving mentality that they have, and their pain tolerance, frankly, their ability to just there's an old saying, I think it's from a movie, that if you're approaching a wall of fire, drive through it. Like, don't stop. And I think a lot of people, when they see a wall of fire in anything in life, the reaction is to freeze or to flee. And the fact is you need to drive through that, basically. And there's something on the other end that will be worth it. So I would say above all them, and we don't have time for me to rattle off all the names of the ones I know, but I'm sure many of them will become household names the same way Elon Musk is today. And it's been an honor to learn from them along the way.
That's amazing. Erik, how are you the difference in the world?
Well, I don't know how much difference I've done yet, but I would say the difference I want to help do, which cuts across both my venture fund and my role with TopTal, is the 20th century and part of the history before it was in many ways built upon people flowing to opportunity. So, for example, your family and my family both came to the New World. Mine from Scandinavian countries to the U.S. and yours from was it Italy to South America, but basically coming to the New World and searching for opportunity. That model is very difficult because the person has to be able to move to get to opportunity, and there can be political barriers. There can be many types of barriers, and people risk their lives and sometimes lose their lives based on that. So all of that is to say, what I want the 21st century to be about is opportunity flowing to people. So wherever you are in the world, opportunity flows to you, not you have to literally get on a boat and risk your life or put your destiny at the mercy of a political process on immigration or things like that. Those are larger factors that you can't control and that you don't want to add to the equation. So I would say above all, I think that there are certain barriers, and you mentioned this in the introduction for me. There are historical barriers, geography, time in terms of time zones, many things that unfortunately still determine someone's destiny from birth. Also things in terms of who their family was, so how much direct access to certain types of opportunity do they have through their personal network. I think that the promise of the internet has not yet been truly realized in terms of how much that can change it. I think it's starting, and I think that the last year, because of the pandemic and us being physically locked in place, that we are now seeing an acceleration of this trend of the internet democratizing access to opportunity and to information. But I would say, frankly, most companies still work as if the internet had never been invented. They use tools, they use Zoom, they use Slack, and they're proud of themselves because they think they're being, sophisticated about that. But when it comes to their true fundamental processes for recruiting talent, for working, for everything, they're still acting as if it's the Industrial Revolution, basically, like an assembly line. So I would say that the fundamental difference I've been trying to help further is break down the historical barriers of time, geography, and other things that have limited people's access to opportunity and made them have to go physically chase opportunity, and make opportunity something that finds people wherever they are instead.
I love that. And definitely you have been making a huge difference. I love that about opportunities flowing to people. Thank you, Erik, for inspiring us today.
Wow, what an absolutely fascinating guy Erik is. Great interview.
Yes, he's amazing person, and great advice and insights. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we did. And that's it for this week. A big thank you to Erik Stettler and to you for listening.
Yeah, and to you as well, Joanna. Great job. You can reach us at howtobethedifference@theinterngroup.com or on social media @theinterngroup. And until next time, we'll catch you then.